Welcome to the latest installment of the 30-Minute Workout Series. My name is Jeff Bartels, and I'm joined today by my colleagues Lou Holland and Matt Wunsch. In today's session, we're going to look at how we can share Civil 3D Cloud project files with both internal and external stakeholders. First, we'll do some webinar logistics. When you connected to today's webinar, by default, you connected using the computer audio. If you'd like to switch to phone audio, you could do that using the audio settings down at the bottom of the screen. If you're having challenges with the audio, sometimes simply disconnecting and reconnecting to the webinar is all it takes to resolve those issues. When it comes to questions, please put those in the Q&A pane. It's the most efficient way for the folks working behind the scenes to find and respond to those questions. If there are any questions at the end of today's session that have gone unanswered, we will get back to you so long as we have your permission to do so. This webinar is recorded. You don't have to worry about taking any notes. Anybody who has registered for the session will get access to a recording after the session is over. I'm bringing up the safe harbor statement. I don't anticipate making any forward-leaning or future development statements regarding our applications today. However, if I do, please don't make any purchasing decisions based on forward-leaning statements because things can and often do change. If you're unfamiliar with the 30-minute workout concept, this is a platform we put together to help folks get up to speed using many of Autodesk's civil infrastructure applications. For the past couple of years, we have looked at many of Autodesk's civil tools. Over the past couple months, we have been exploring how to use Civil 3D in conjunction with the Construction Cloud. During these sessions, we take a step-by-step approach to the material. We include practical examples where we can. These sessions do have some ground rules. You may notice that some of the examples that we show are abstract in nature. We do that on purpose. This way we can focus solely on how a tool works. Once you understand how the tool works, you can apply it in whatever situation works best for you. We value your time, so we are committed to always starting and ending on time. These sessions are recorded, as I mentioned earlier. The most important ground rule is please put those questions in the Q&A pane. We have a lot of things to talk about today. We're going to be looking at multiple ways to share files with stakeholders. This is going to be no means an overall be-all, end-all list of ways to share files. We'll actually be looking at additional ways to share files in our next session. Today, we're just going to be exploring a few ways, and I've got them organized into two buckets: informal file sharing and formal file sharing. Informal file sharing is going to be very similar to how we might share files today using an FTP site or a Dropbox or a OneDrive or something like that. Remember that the Construction Cloud represents unlimited file storage and virtually unlimited file sizes. So it's a great way to exchange even really large files with virtually any stakeholder using just a single application. Under informal file sharing, I'll show you how we can create folders and assign permissions. We'll look at how we can put content in those folders. We'll look at how we can subscribe to the folders so that we get notified when the contents of those folders change. We'll look at the audit trail so that we can ensure that when we make files available to folks that they're actually viewing and downloading those files. We'll also look at how we can exchange files with folks that may not have access to the Construction Cloud. Then we'll explore formal file sharing. The Docs module includes a transmittals feature that allows us to create a log or an archive of all of the transmittals that occur between stakeholders. We'll look at how we can create transmittals, how we can assign files to those transmittals. We'll look at how we can view transmittal details and export reports for the transmittals, download transmittal contents. We'll look at how we can filter transmittals and much more. At the end, I'm going to be sharing some additional resources if you'd like more information about the topics that we covered today. As always, this is going to be a PowerPoint-free zone. We'll be working live in the application for the duration of our time together. I'm going to drop out of this. As you can see, I am in the Construction Cloud. I am in a project called Fairview, and I'm in the Docs module, so we can see the directory structure for this project. Now, I've got a simple directory structure in this case. You can use whatever directory structure you like. As I click on these folders, we can see that I do have some content in this project. Let's assume that I would like to send some files to a landscape architect, and I'm going to kind of simulate a workflow that we might use on a traditional FTP site or Dropbox, something like that. I'm going to create a folder to put those files in. To create a folder, I'm going to right-click on Project Files, and I'll choose Add Subfolder, and I'm going to call this To Others. And let's say that the intention of making the To Others folder is that I may wish to create multiple folders inside To Others for various stakeholders that I may want to share files with. I am going to right-click on To Others, and we'll add another folder in here. I'll call this Landscape Architect, and then I'll press Enter. Once I create the folder, I can then assign permissions. This is how I control access to this content. We talked about permissions a few weeks ago. If you're not familiar with permissions in the Construction Cloud, don't worry. At the end of today's session, I'm going to be sharing a link to all the recordings of our prior sessions so you'll be able to review those workflows. For right now, to assign permissions, I'm going to right-click on this folder, and I'll choose Permission Settings. And I would like to add permissions, so I'll click Add. Our landscape architect is going to be Morty Hackett. I'm going to be adding him by putting his email address in here. As I start typing his email address, you can see that Morty is a project member. However, Morty does not have access to any of these folders at this point. This will be the only folder Morty has access to. For the permissions, I will click, and for this example, I'm going to give Morty the highest level create permissions. This will allow him to view, download, and upload to this folder. It will also allow him to publish markups. Let's click Add, and then I can close up these panes. Now I can put some content in here for Morty. Since Morty's a landscape architect, he may be interested in the site plan for this project. If I go into the CAD files folder, this happens to be where the live files are being worked on, so Morty doesn't have access to this directory. I'm going to make this site plan file available to him. You can see these files are being versioned up. We know from what we've seen that each time you save the file, you get new versions here in the cloud. It's important for Morty to have this specific version of this file. So what I'm going to do is copy this file into this folder for Morty. If I come down to the end of the row, we'll see that each file has a More button. If we click to open the More menu, we can see the options that are available here. We're going to be using the More menu quite a bit today. From here, I'll choose Copy, and then I can select where I would like to copy this file. I'm going to drop that into the Landscape Architect folder, and I'll click Copy. I can then jump into the Landscape Architect folder, and we can see that file is arriving. So it was version 4 in the original location. We can see it's version 1 here. It's the first iteration of that file in this folder. Seeing this, we know that I can exchange files that are part of my live design files. I can also share content that's on my local hard drive. For example, I'm going to pull up my Windows Explorer, and maybe Morty would like this PDF. Maybe he needs to have that. I'm going to drag and drop this into the cloud environment, so it will upload to the cloud. We can see that file is arriving. At this point, I would contact Morty to let him know that the files are available for his use. Now, contacting somebody is nice, but I don't want to do that each time I put a file in here, and sometimes Morty may put content in here for me. I don't want him to have to contact me each time. Using the Construction Cloud, we can subscribe to folders. This way, anytime the contents of a folder changes, for instance, I put a new file in for Morty or he puts a new file in for me, it will notify anybody who has subscribed to the folder. I'm going to subscribe to the folder. I'll do that by right-clicking on this folder, and under More, I'll choose Subscribe. And you can see that I can subscribe to this folder only, or I can subscribe to this folder and all subfolders. So you have that option. In this case, it isn't going to make a difference. I'm just going to go ahead and click Subscribe. I would also encourage Morty to do the same thing. This way, as I send him new files, he'll be notified that those files are available. Let's take a look at things from Morty's perspective. I am going to jump into another web browser, and we will log into the Construction Cloud. I'm going to log in as Morty, and we'll put in his name and password. We'll jump into the Fairview project. When I do, we can see that Morty only has access to the folder for which he has been given rights. So these are the only 2 files that he can see. Since he is a member of the project, he has the ability to view these files. If I click on Site Plan, it will open this up within the viewer, so he can review that here right within the web browser. If you remember, we gave him the ability to create markups, so he could do that here as well if that was part of the workflow that we needed. Let's close the viewer. Morty can also download these files to the local machine. If we come down to the More button here next to Site Plan, I can open that up, and I could download this. So we'll have Morty download a version of that. Note that the More button typically applies to individual files. We can also leverage the More menu if we select multiple files. We can do that over here. It'll also work if you click one file, but notice if I select a file, we get a More button up here that has the same options. So this allows me to select multiple files. If I grab both of these, I could click this More button and I could choose Download. And what it'll do if you grab multiple files, it will allow you to pull this down as a zip file. Since we're talking about this, the button right here is used to select and deselect all files. So using that, I could select the whole folder, I could select the whole project and download it if I had access to that. All right, so Morty can view these files. He can download them to the local machine. Maybe the intention is for Morty to make some changes to a file, maybe this PDF, for instance, and then upload that to this directory. I am going to simulate that. Now, this file, this PDF hasn't changed, but we can simulate that. I'm going to drag this back in. We'll say Morty's uploading it now. I'm doing this to show you that when we exchange files in this way, we will have a pristine copy of every version of every file because the cloud platform maintains every version. We can see that here. Let's minimize Morty's view, and we will return to my view. I'm going to hit F5 here to refresh my screen. In my view, I want to talk about the concept of an audit trail. Have you ever sent files to a stakeholder only to have them come back and say, you know what, I never received those files? I know when I worked in industry, we used to jump through a bunch of hoops with Outlook and tracking and things like that just to try and identify or prove that people were downloading and viewing the files that we sent them. We don't have to do that when we use the Construction Cloud because the Construction Cloud maintains a file activity log for every file that's within the platform. For example, this is the file that I made available to Morty. If I come down and expand the More button, from here I can choose View File Activities, and this will show me a record of everything that's happened with this file. I can see where the file came from. Jeff Bartels copied version 4, and this happens to be a hyperlink. I could click to go right to the original version of this file in the other folder. So version 4 of this file from the CAD files folder, also a hyperlink, and this was placed in the current folder as version 1. Morty Hackett viewed this file. Name, date, time. Morty Hackett downloaded this file. Name, date, time. I can see he downloaded it twice. If you remember, he downloaded it as a zip file as well. So we are maintaining all of that information in the background. Let's close this. Likewise, we can view all of the versions. If I click on version 2 here in the version column, I can see here's the version that I uploaded. Here's the version that Morty uploaded. Once again, name, date, time. Let's close this. I can also see for the latest one, I can see that Morty updated this version. So if we exchange files in this way, we have access to all of that additional information. Now, after seeing this, you may be wondering if it's possible to exchange files with folks that aren't a member of the Construction Cloud. We can do that as well. We have some limitations there, but we can send the files using a public link. To generate a public link, this is a feature that we need to configure for the project, and we do that here within the Files area, which is where I am. I'm going to come down to Settings, and I'll choose Advanced Settings. Here's the feature, Public Links to Sheets and Files. By default, this is turned off. I'm going to click to turn that feature on. And when I turn that on, let's come over here. Here's where we can set the maximum expiration for the links that we create. By default, this is set to 90 days, but we could take this all the way up to a year if we wanted to. I'm going to leave that at 90 days for right now, and then I will click the Files link to go back to the Files area. If I would like to share files using a public link, I can do that using the More button if I want to do it one file at a time. Or if I grab multiple files, I can use the More button up here. This is where I can choose Share. This brings up the Share dialog box. If you remember, we used Share when we talked about Bridge a few sessions ago. This is where we could share the stuff with another project. Since I turned on that public link, now I have the ability to share this with anyone with the link. Let me choose that option. Here's where I can choose the expiration for that public link. By default, that is going to be set to 2 weeks from the date the link was created. However, we've seen that with this project now, it's set to 90 days. Let's just set it to 90. Here's a nice setting. When you share a link with someone, what version of the file do you want them to have? Do you want them to have the version of the file that was current at the time you created the link? Or do you want them to have the version of the file that is current at the time they click the link? You can do it either way. So in this case, with Morty, it was important for me to give him a specific version of the file. I could use this option. But seeing the other option that's there and knowing that I can have links that are good for a year, I could create a public link and send that to a stakeholder and make it such that each time they click that link over the course of the year, they'll get the latest version of a file. So we can do either. Let's choose link. When I do this, I can see the hyperlinks associated with each file. If I click the copy button, it will copy that to the clipboard such that I can paste it into the email application of my choice. If I would like to share all of these, I could click Share All, and then I could just paste all of them into the email application that I use. Having said that, you don't have to use an external email application. You could send the email right from here. If I click this, I could take care of everything right from within this dialog box. Title, we'll just call this File Share. Recipient, I'm going to send this to myself just so we can see what this looks like. Now I'm a member of this project, but I can type in an individual's email address just so we can simulate being outside the project. Note, we'll say here are the files you requested, and I'll click send. When we send files using a public link, you will see a icon show up next to those files or folders. We can share a folder that way as well. So in the indicators column, we will see this little globe. If you hover over the globe, it will tell you that file's been shared publicly. We can also use the tooltip to delete a link. Let's take a look at the email that's associated with that public link. I'm going to do one of the most dangerous things you can do during a live demonstration. I'm going to open my email, and I will double click to open this up. Here's the email that I received after sharing those files. This is what your external stakeholder would see. They have an option to download either file individually, or if they click View All, it will take them to a page where they can see the files. Now, they can't view the actual file because they're not a member of the project. They can't open that in the browser, but they can download the individual files, or they can download them all by clicking this button. Let me close this and we'll return to the web browser. As you can see, using these informal methods of file sharing, we can easily share content with any of our stakeholders using a single platform. We're also maintaining a pristine copy of every file that goes out and comes in, and we have a full record of all file activities with the associated names and dates. In the event a stakeholder exists outside the Construction Cloud platform, we can easily share files with them as well using public links. Now, let's look at how we could share files in a more formal fashion. The Docs module includes a transmittals feature. This allows us to log all of the transactions that occur between stakeholders. When I select the transmittals feature, it opens up the transmittal log. Here I can see a record of all of the transmittals that have occurred with this project. Currently, I don't have any. If I want to create a transmittal, I can click the Create Transmittal button. This gives me access to the directory structure for the project where I can select the files that are associated with my transmittal. I can choose individual files if I want to, or I can select an entire folder. If you select the entire folder, it will select all the files and subfolders within that folder. For this example, I'm going to choose the CAD files folder and maybe the images folder, and I'll click Select Files. This brings up the Create Transmittal dialog box, and I can fill this out to create my transmittal. I'm just going to give this a generic title. We'll just call this a Utility Review. I'm sure you can come up with a much more exciting transmittal title when you send a transmittal to your stakeholders. Then for the recipients, the transmittals can only be sent to members of the project. So for recipients, I can choose individual members. I can also send a transmittal to a role, or I can send a transmittal to a company if I'd like to send this to multiple folks at one time. For right now, I'm just going to send it to a couple of users, and then I will click Save. And then for the view permissions, if I am sending this to multiple recipients, do I want each recipient to be able to see all the other recipients that got this transmittal or not? If I choose this option, then recipients will only be able to see themselves when they view the contents of the transmittal. Down below, I can see the contents of the transmittal. We can see that I've selected a pair of folders, and we can see a file count here. I can click the X to remove these items if needed, and I can select additional files here. Down at the bottom, I can enter a message. I'm going to type, "Here are the files you requested." And I'll choose Create. When I do that, the transmittal is sent to the recipients, and then the transmittal displays here in the log. A transmittal displays as an individual row, and in the row, we can see the status of the transmittal. This was sent. I can see the ID. These are numeric, so this is the first transmittal that was created. I can see the title, who it was sent by, who it was sent to, when it was created, and the number of files that are within the transmittal. If you click on a transmittal, it will allow you to view the transmittal details. In this pane, I can see the files that were sent with this transmittal. And I can view this a couple ways. By default, we get the folder view. I can also get this as a files view. Here in the files list, we can see the name of the files that were sent. It's important to note that these are hyperlinks. If I click, this will take me right to the file. In fact, it will take me right to the specific version of this file that was current when the transmittal was created. So it does maintain that. I've got hyperlinks here to the paths, so it'll take me to the folder where the file exists. We can also see when it was last updated and who it was updated by. There are a pair of other columns in here, description and review status. These are populated automatically if they are populated within the Files area. Just as an example, let's do a quick field trip over to Files. When we're in the Files area, if we're looking at folders or files, we can see a description area here. This is where we can add additional metadata to our files. If I click the pencil, I can add a custom description. You can put anything you want in there. Being that I have a description here now, if I was to create a transmittal for this file, this description will come along into the transmittal. When it comes to the review status column, this is where we can see the status of any reviews that are associated with these files. The Docs module includes a reviews feature. This will be a topic for another day. In the reviews feature, I can set up a review procedure. How many people are going to be involved in the review? How much time are they going to have to do the review? What are the different status options? Where are the files going to go once they're reviewed? All of that can be managed within that feature, and then the various status will show up here in the column. Let me mention that we'll be talking about that in a future session, but if you would like more information about reviews today, at the end of today's session, I'll be providing a link to the reviews course on the learnacc.autodesk.com site if you'd like to explore that early. Okay, let's go back to transmittals. I will jump back into the log. So we talked about the files in the transmittal. Over here under details, we can see who sent the transmittal and who it was sent to. Let's look at one more thing. I'm going to go back to files. We don't have to go into the full-blown transmittals feature to send a transmittal. We can actually shortcut this a little bit. If we're in the files area, I can select individual files, or I could select a folder. Let's do a folder in this case. If I choose a folder, I can come down to the More button here, or we can do it up here. You'll find Create Transmittal is in that menu as well. When I choose Create Transmittal, it'll take you right to the Create Transmittal dialog box. I'm going to keep the default name, which is the name of that folder. Recipients, I'm going to send that to myself. Let's click Save. View permissions, not going to worry about that. You can see the 4 files included in that folder. We'll say, here are your files. I'll click Create. That sends the transmittal to the recipient. I can go ahead and deselect this now. Let's take a look at the transmittal that was sent. Once again, I'm going to pull up my email. And we'll open up this one. This is the transmittal that I just sent, transmittal number 2. We've got the note here. Here are your files. There's the title. There's the number of documents. If you send a transmittal to somebody, it will include this View Transmittal hyperlink. If we click it, it will take them right into the transmittals feature. So this is where we were. They can see the contents of the transmittal, both in a folder and a file view. And you can see the description came across this time. In the file view, they can click and view the respective versions that were shared with them. They also have the ability to download a zip file of this content if they want it on their local machine. I'm going to choose Download Zip File. And then we can click here, and in my Windows Explorer, you can see there's the zip file, and it's giving me the contents of that CAD folder. I can also, if I would like a more formal record of the transmittal, I can open this menu and I can choose Export Report. This will create an Excel document that highlights the contents of this transmittal. If I click, I can open this in Excel. The Excel document will be a 2-page document. Cover page will have the transmittal name as well as the particulars. And on the files sheet, I can see the files that were included in that transmittal as well as the additional metadata here. Let's close this up. So that's what people would get if they receive the transmittal. That's how they would access it. That's how they would also download it or view a report. If I go back to transmittals, in the transmittal log, I want to show you that each includes a More button. From here, I've got a shortcut to download the zip files or create a report. And if I am an administrator or the person that created the transmittal, I have the opportunity to change the toggle for what recipients can see. I just click that. You can see now they can see all recipients. All right, as you create transmittals and they start to stack up in the log, we can sort them using the search feature here. If I type in a text string, for instance, I'm going to type CAD, and then I'll click the magnifying glass. You can see that this applies to the title area. It's showing me any transmittal that includes that text string. Let's close this up, and I'll go to the filters area. I can also filter my transmittals based on who they were sent by and time period. I could choose a start date and an end date if I wanted to go that route. So using the transmittal feature, we are essentially building a searchable archive that logs all content shared between stakeholders and spans the entire history of the project. Let me show you one more thing. You saw that when I created a transmittal today, the transmittal showed up in my mailbox instantaneously. The first time you try this on your end, you may have to wait up to an hour for that email to show up. And let me show you why. Within the Construction Cloud, I'm going to open up my profile. From here, I'll choose Notification Settings. Here's where you can adjust the notifications on a project-by-project basis. If I expand these options here, you can see all the items within my project that may generate a notification. If we come down to Transmittals, by default, in my case, this was set to hourly, which means that any of these items that are set to hourly, as activity occurs on your project, each hour you will receive an email digest that includes all the items that are tagged for hourly. But for this webinar, I wanted to be able to view those immediately, so I just went through and set this to instantly. Okay, let me drop out of this. We are getting dangerously close to the bottom of the hour. I'm going to bring back up my PowerPoints. Today, we talked about informal file sharing. I showed you how you could exchange files via folders and folder permissions. We looked at how we could subscribe to folders such that as the contents of those folders change, we will get notifications. We saw how the Audit Trail works. This is how we can view the file activities for every file within the Construction Cloud. This will help us identify if the people that we're exchanging files with have actually viewed or downloaded those files. We also saw that we could use public links as a means to share files with people that are outside the Construction Cloud. Then we talked about formal file sharing. We looked at the transmittals feature. The transmittals feature allows us to create a log or an archive of all of the transactions that happen between stakeholders. We saw how we could create transmittals. We saw how we could incorporate files into those transmittals. We saw we could view the contents and export transmittals to a report. We also saw how we could download the contents of transmittals and filter transmittals. Today, we're going to be sharing the hyperlink to the Transmittals course. This is a video-based training course on the learnacc.autodesk.com site. It covers even more information than what we had a chance to talk about today. You will also be receiving a link to the reviews course if you're interested in taking a look at that early. I'm also going to be sharing a link to our prior 30-minute workout sessions. It will also allow you to sign up for the next session, which is going to be on March 12th. On March 12th, we're going to look at how we can configure Civil 3D Cloud projects for multi-team collaboration. This would allow us to create dedicated team spaces if we have multiple teams associated with a project. We'll look at how we can configure the team spaces, control team membership. We'll look at how the folders are managed when we're using multi-team collaboration. We will also talk about how we can exchange packages and how we can review the contents of those packages and how they can be shared using swim lanes. If there are any questions at this point that have gone unanswered, we will get back to you with an answer so long as we have your permission. On behalf of Lou Holland, Matt Wunsch, all the folks working behind the scenes here at Autodesk and myself, I want to say thank you so much for coming to today's session. We value your time. We hope you find value in these sessions, and we look forward to seeing you guys again at our next 30-minute workout.